Alright, theorists, we gotta talk about Scions, because no matter which way you slice it with your hotshot lasgun, they are one of the most efficient units in the game for their points. So let's take a look at how they perform in the different detachments, which detachment is best for them, and how much damage they can do. Thunderhammer that like and subscribe button, hit Nurgle's bell, check out the other videos, leave comments, and check out the other channel that will one day become interesting. I'm currently recording Dawn of War 2. Go laugh at me, make fun of how angry I get playing video games. That's kind of the whole point of that channel, is just to have people clown on me. So, first, and as always, let's get a little bit more familiar with the Scions and take a look at their data sheet. So not your average guardsman, pretty close, but they've got some buffs compared to a regular guardsman. They move 6, they're toughness 3, they do have a 4-up save, they're 1 wound, leadership 7, OC of 1. And then they've got some ranged weapons, so they've got access to things like flamers, grenade launchers, hotshot las guns, that's going to be what most of your boys are rocking with, hotshot volley guns, melta-guns, plasma guns, all kinds of good stuff. And then you got plasma pistols as well in there. For melee, don't even worry about that. But interesting to note, they do have 2 attacks apiece. For our abilities, each time a model in this unit makes an attack, reroll a hit roll of 1. If the target of that attack is an enemy unit within range of an objective marker, you can reroll the hit roll instead. And I did forget to mention that they also do have Deep Strike. We've got some war gear abilities. Every unit, I think, has access to a Vox caster, just about every infantry unit for Imperial Guard. Anytime you target them with a stratagem, roll a dice on a 5-up, gain a CP back. We then have our war gear options. So for every 5 models in the unit, up to 2 Tempestus Scions can each have their hotshot lasgun replaced with one of the following: flamer, grenade launcher, hotshot volley gun, melta-gun, plasma gun. You cannot select the same weapon from this list more than once per unit unless it contains 10 models, in which case you cannot select the same unit more than twice. So basically what this ends up boiling down to is you're going to take 2 plasma guns and you're going to take 2 melta-guns. Maybe sometimes you'll take the hotshot volley guns instead of melta-guns. But for this demonstration, we're going to be giving them the melta-guns, just because their damage output is a little higher. One of them can take a Vox caster. The Tempestor's chainsword can be replaced with basically a power fist, because that's what you're likely going to take there. And then the hotshot las pistol on the Tempestor sergeant guy can be a plasma pistol, because you're never going to take the bolt pistol. They come in at 60 points or 120, and they did go up in points recently. They were 50 or 100. They do also have grenades, which is a relevant keyword on them. And that's what we get. We get a unit of guys that has 4 different special weapons, about 5 hotshot las guns for 120 points with full rerolls to hit. So, not a horrible unit for 120 points, and like I said, they did go up from 100 points in the last field manual, so let's now then take a look at the command squad, because you probably want one of those as well. Our command squad is pretty similar in terms of its stat line. The only difference is the Tempestor Prime. He's got 3 wounds instead of 1, but otherwise is the exact same, moving 6, toughness 3 with a 4-up save, leadership 7, and a single OC. This unit also has access to flamers, grenade launchers, hotshot las guns, hotshot volley guns, melta-guns, and plasma guns, and of course the plasma pistol, the fabled plasma pistol. For combat, they don't have too much to write home about. They really don't have anything. They can't get like a power fist or anything there. They have Tempestus daggers or close combat weapons, neither of which are going to kill a fucking thing. Then we have our abilities, and this is where things start to get interesting. Tempestor Prime. While this unit contains a Tempestor Prime, ranged weapons equipped by models in this unit have sustained hits, with full rerolls if you're on an objective. We then have some war gear abilities here. We got the Command Rod. While this bearer is leading a unit, it can be affected by up to 2 different orders at the same time. This is very good. This means that we can be doing first rank fire, second rank fire, and take aim, or we can be moving, and then doing first rank fire, second rank fire, having better armor, having better OC. Any of the different orders you can kind of mix and match which ones that you want on these guys. We then have the Master Vox. The officer can issue an order up to 24 inches away. We then have the Medipack, gives the unit a 6-up feel no pain, which is pretty nice to have, especially when you're taking cover, have a 3-up save. And then you're in cover as well, and then you also have a 6-up feel no pain. You got 15 guys in the unit. This unit becomes a little annoying to deal with at that point. And then we have the Regimental Standard, which adds 1 to the objective control characteristic of models in the bearer's unit. Notably, the way that the Regimental Standard is worded you get this +1 OC even if you're battle shocked, because you become OC 0 and then you get +1 to it. That is how that works. And this is part of why, I assume, GW has specified lately this unit will get extra OC if it's not battle shocked. And I'm not just talking about the Tempesters, I'm talking about other things as well. That's becoming more common. These guys can only lead the Tempestus Scions. Then we have this other little ability called Tempestor Prime. If this unit's Tempestor Prime model is your warlord, Tempestus Scion units from your army have the battle line keyword. Okay. We can issue 1 order. And then we have a bunch of war gear options, so any number of Scions can have their hotshot lasgun replaced with one of the following: Flamer, Grenade Launcher, Hotshot, Volley Gun, Meltagun, Plasma Gun, and you cannot select the same weapon from this list more than once per unit. So again, you're likely going to have 1 Plasma Gun, 1 Meltagun. But then we can have a Scion who is equipped with a Hotshot Lasgun take the Regimental Standard. His Hotshot Lasgun can't be replaced, so you can't also have him with a Plasma Gun. That'd be too cool. Then we can have one guy take a Master Vox. You can probably skip that one. 1 Tempestus Scion's Hotshot Lasgun can be replaced with one of the following. So you're going to take the Medipack and the Hotshot Lasgun, because you have 2 options here: Hotshot Las Pistol and Medipack, or Hotshot Lasgun, Hotshot Las Pistol, and a Medipack. So why would you ever take the first option? I don't fucking know. The Tempestor Prime's Bolt Pistol can be replaced with a Plasma Pistol or a Command Rod. Now, we come in at 70 points for our 5 models here, and that's kind of what we get. So getting these sustained hits and the extra orders, and then, of course, we're getting a 6 of Feeling No Pain, +1 OC. There's a lot of things that this unit will do for your Scions that make them much, much more interesting. So overall, pretty sweet. Sustained hits on everything with full rerolls, 2 orders, possibly, +1 OC, 6 of Feeling No Pain. You got a lot of options here. And then we have those orders, which is our army rule. And because of that Command Rod, if we do take that instead of the Plasma Pistol, which you could make an argument for that to be better depending on how the army, what it's supposed to do. But if you do take the Command Rod, we can issue 2 orders to the unit. For orders, this means that we can have move, 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 and then first rank, second rank, like I just said a second ago. Or you can do like first rank and then take aim to be hitting on 2s, among a bunch of other combinations. But you're almost always going to order first rank, second rank, because it gives their plasma guns and hot shots an extra attack, meaning it's going to put out 11 plasma shots if you don't take the Command Rod, or 10 if you do, and then 3 melta shots, and then like 19 hot shot lasgun shots. You got a lot of shooting coming out of this unit that now has rerolls to hit and now has sustained 1. So we have to make a choice here between which detachment we want to take, and we'll want to take a look at some math before deciding which one to pick. If we stick them in the combined regiment, we have lethal hits against non-monsters and vehicles. So, 66% we'll say of the units in the game we have lethal hits against. The majority of units in the game are not monsters and vehicles. And so now you can have lethal hits, sustained hits, full rerolls against all of those targets. And this lasts the entire game. And that's all for 190 points. It's total nonsense. And if we wanted to get really spicy, we could go for Drill Commander, which is an enhancement that makes us crit on 5s. So that's fucking dumb. Now, if we go for the Bridgehead detachment, we do get +1 to wound on the turn that we drop or disembark. Again, 190 points, kind of nonsensical with how much damage these guys can do, but this is where things get weird. Having lethals and sustained with, which is regular crits, no critting on 5s, just rerolls with lethals and sustained. It is mathematically superior than having +1 to wound. The caveat here is that you will lose lethal hits if you shoot at a monster or a vehicle, so that will diminish your damage against those targets when compared to the Bridgehead strike. In that case where you are shooting a monster or a vehicle, Bridgehead does do a little bit more damage, but how much more damage? Well, admittedly, not that much. Enough to take note of with your plasma guns, but not much else. And this includes using a Taurox, because the Taurox can only hold 12 guys, so you can't have the command squad in there, which means you lose special weapons despite getting full rerolls there. But instead of me just telling you, I will show you the math. So we'll start up with our combined regiment shooting at a non-monster or vehicle. Alright, so we're going to start up with our plasma guns, and then we'll go to the melta guns, and then we'll go to the hot shots, and I will compare this to what we get in the Bridgehead, and what we can get in the Bridgehead with a Taurox. So with our plasma guns, if we're wounding on 6s, we're looking at about 4.7 wounds. For wounding on 5s, we're looking at about 6. 4s, we're looking at about 7, 7.3. 3s, we're looking at about 8.5 to 9. And 2s, we're looking at about 10 exactly. And those are 10 wounds, that's before saves or anything like that. With the Bridgehead, they are going to be +1 to wound. So if I'm wounding on 6s, getting 4.67 wounds, you're going to be wounding on 5s. 3.76. If we're wounding on 5s, you're wounding on 4s, and you get 5.65 through compared to my 6. If you're wounding on 3s, that means I'm wounding on 4s from the combined regiment. There it was 7.32. Here it's 7.53, so that is slightly more wounds with that, wounding on 3s compared to me wounding on 4s. But then if you're wounding on 2s and I'm also wounding on 2s, I'm looking at about 10 exactly. You're looking at about 9.4. So when it comes to shooting a non-monster or vehicle, combined regiment takes the cake there. If we're going to talk about Bridgehead with a Tarok, so 10 guys in the Taroks jumping out, if I'm wounding on 6s, I'm getting 4.7 wounds. You're only getting 3.96. You are +1 to wound, but you end up with about 4 wounds, so still less. If I'm wounding on 5s and getting 6 wounds, you're wounding on 4s and getting 5.4 wounds. If I'm wounding on 4s and I get 7.3, you're wounding on 3s and getting 6.4. And then if I'm wounding on 3s, I'm getting about 8.67. You're getting about 7. But let's move on to the melt-guns here. If we're wounding on 6s in our combined regiment, we're looking at about 1.3. If we're wounding on 5s, we're looking at about 1.6. 4s, exactly 2. 3s, 2.36, 2.37, in that range, rounding and such. If we're wounding on 2s, you're looking at about 2.7, so almost 3 wounds there. In the Bridgehead strike, if I'm wounding on 6s, getting 1.3, you're wounding on 5s, and you're going to get 1.03. If you're wounding on 4s, I'm wounding on 5s. I get 1.63. If I'm wounding on 5s, you get 1.54. Now here the math changes just a little bit. If you're wounding on 3s, you do get 2.05 wounds, as opposed to my 2 wounds. So completely negligible there, but technically the Bridgehead does have more damage there, 0.05 more wounds. And when Bridgehead's wounding on 2s with that +1 a wound, that means I'd be wounding on 3s in combined regiment. That's a 2.36 for combined versus a 2.57 for Bridgehead, so 0.15-ish more wounds there. But if I'm wounding on 2s, if we're both wounding on 2s, I get 2.72 versus 2.57, so slightly less damage from Bridgehead there for both wounding on 2s. So let's pop them in a Taroks first, and then we'll go on to our hotshot lasguns. So if you're wounding on 5s in your Bridgehead strike, coming out of a Taroks with your Meltaguns, you're looking at 1.13 total wounds there, because you only get 2 shots. That's compared to my 1.28, because I'd be wounding on 6s. If you're wounding on 4s, I'm wounding on 5s. So if you're wounding on 4s, like 1.52. If I'm wounding on 5s, 1.63. If you're wounding on 3s, you get 1.85 out of that Taroks, but I get 2. If you're wounding on 2s, you're looking at about 2 exactly, 2.02-ish wounds. I'm wounding on 3s because I'm not +1 to wound, and I get 2.36. And then if we're both wounding on 2s, forget about it. You're looking at 2.02 still. I'm looking at 2.72. And so the combined regiment still wins out there. Now for our hotshot lasguns. Not as much to go over here because really there's no way for a hotshot lasgun to ever wound on 3s naturally unless you're shooting like literally 2 targets, maybe 3 targets. But Rattlings definitely are toughness 2. So you have at least 1 target that you could be wounding on 3s against. It's not worth my time. Let's just go on here. So if I'm wounding on 6s, 8.1 wounds. If I'm wounding on 5s, 10.4. If I'm wounding on 4s, 12.7. Compared to Bridgehead, they're never going to be wounding on 6s because they're +1 to wound. They get 6.5 wounds compared to my 8.1. If you are wounding on 4s, I'm wounding on 5s. You get 9.77, I still have 10.4, and then if you do get to wounding on 3s, so you're shooting some sort of toughness 3 infantry, you will net a little bit more there. You will get about 13 wounds, a little over 13 wounds, compared to my 12.7. So 0.35-ish more wounds. If we hop out of a Taroks, we actually do more damage, specifically with these hotshot lasguns. You'll end up getting 9.16 wounds if you're hitting something that you'd normally be wounding on 6s, now you're wounding on 5s. Looking at 9 wounds compared to my 8.1. If you're wounding on 4s, you're looking at 12.5 compared to my 10.4. And if you're wounding on 3s, you're looking at 14.8 compared to my 12.7. So you do net 1 to 3-ish extra wounds there with your hotshot lasguns if you're jumping out of a Taroks. And again, this entire section here that we just went over, this was all against the, I would call them ideal target, a non-monster or vehicle. And so the combined regiment does do more damage just overall The only place that it loses out in the specific scenario where you take a 10-man unit in a Taurox and get out for the +1 to wound and the full rerolls to wound, and only with your hotshot lasguns, which are your least powerful weapon. And even there, you're talking about at most 3 extra wounds from a 1 damage weapon. So that's what we get shooting at our ideal target. If we're shooting at our non-ideal target, so a monster or a vehicle, I don't think it takes, a genius to figure out that the Bridgehead strike is going to do more damage there, so let's go over that as well. If we're in combined regiment and we're not getting lethal hits anymore, if I'm wounding on 6s with my plasma guns, I'm only getting 1.8 wounds total. 1.88. Compared to Bridgehead, they'd be +1 to wound. They're looking at 3.76, which is double. If I'm wounding on 5s, I'm looking at also 3.76. But you'd be +1 to wound there, so you'd be wounding on 4s, and you're looking at 5.64, which is the same amount more. It's 1.88 more. And this pretty much goes down the line here. If I'm wounding on 3s in the combined arms, combined regiment, I keep calling the combined arms, 7.5-ish, but you're looking at 9.4 in Bridgehead. If we're both wounding on 2s, though, we're both looking at 9.4. Although I don't know of any monster or vehicle that is toughness 4, so that's probably not an actual thing there. But overall, he's looking at about 2 more wounds all the way down the chart here. And those are AP3, that could be ignoring cover potentially, so those will probably get through. So you're looking at, call it 3 extra damage, just mathematically speaking. You're looking at about 3 extra damage to a vehicle if you take the Bridgehead strike with your plasma guns compared to the combined regiment. Forgot to do the Taurox guy, forgot to add him in. So back to that, right? So I wound on 6s, I get 1.88. That means you wound on 5s, you get 3.96, so basically 2 more wounds than I would get with our plasma guns. If I'm wounding on 5s, I'm looking at 3.76, you're looking at 5.4, so like 1.64 more wounds there. If I'm wounding on 4s, I'm looking at 5.64, you're looking at 6.41 because you're wounding on 3s in that case, so 0.77 extra there. If we're both wounding on 2s, I am looking at 9.4 and you are only looking at 7, and that's just based on purely the fact that you have less models with less weapons shooting, so you actually do a little bit less damage there with the Bridgehead and a Taurox. With Meltaguns, our difference is about a half of a wound all the way down the board. If I'm wounding on 6s, I'm looking at about a half a wound. You're looking at about 1 exactly. If I'm wounding on 5s, I'm looking at about 1 wound exactly. You're looking at about 1.5. And the numbers are on screen here. I might not be saying them exactly as they are printed. I'm kind of just rounding in my head as I'm speaking, just so you guys understand that. If you are wounding on 4s, that means that I'm wounding on 5s. So 1 for me, 1.5 for you. If I'm wounding on 4s, I get 1.5, but you get 2. If I'm wounding on 3s, I get 2, but you get 2.5. But if we're both wounding on 2s, it's the same there. So overall, it's about half of a wound extra with a Meltagun for every one of those. So definitely more. If we take a look at what we get from our Taurox with our full rerolls to wound, you actually do less damage. The only time you do more damage is if I'm wounding on 6s and you're wounding on 5s, because I get half a wound, you get 0.68. If I'm wounding on 5s, I get 1 wound, you get 1.03, you get 1.02. So it is very, very, very small amount. If I'm wounding on 4s, I'm looking at 1.5, 1.54. You're looking at 1.35, which is less. If I'm wounding on 3s, I'm looking at 2.05. You're looking at 1.73. So a 15-man versus a 15-man, Bridgehead's going to win out. But if it's a 15-man in combined arms versus a 10-man coming out of a Taurox, the 10-man or the 15-man will actually do more damage in the combined regiment still. And then we'll move to the hot shots here. So if we shoot our hot shots at some monster or vehicle in the combined regiment, we're looking at about 3.25 wounds compared to Bridgehead. They're looking at 6.5, so that is 3 wounds more. If I'm wounding on 5s, you're wounding on 4s, you're going to get 9.76. I'm going to get 6.5. Again, that's another 3 extra wounds. Now, if I'm wounding on 4s, I'm looking at 9.76, but you're on 3s at that point, and you're looking at 13, which is still like another 3 extra wounds. So you're looking at 3 extra wounds with your hot shots. So if we pop them in a Taurox, you can never wound on 6s, so you're always going to be wounding on 5s or better. If you're wounding on 5s, you're getting 9.16. I'm only getting 3.25. That is 6 more wounds. So significantly more wounds there with our hot shots. If you wound on 4s, I'm wounding on 5s. You're looking at 12.5. I'm looking at 6.5, so you're getting like 6 wounds more there. And then if you are wounding on 3s, I cannot do that. You're looking at 14.82. I'm looking at 9.76, so you're still looking at about 5 extra wounds there. So in total, Your Bridgehead with a Taurox with guys getting out, their hotshot lasguns will put out more damage than basically any other combination here. So total, when we look at the combined regiment in every scenario here versus the Bridgehead detachment in basically every scenario here, more often than not, we're going to want to take the combined regiment because we do more damage against our ideal targets. And even when we're going up against a monster or a vehicle, 2 extra wounds, with our plasma guns, half an extra wound with our melta guns, you lose too much to get that little bit of extra damage on everything, I think. And so that is what we're looking at here. Against a non-monster and vehicle, combined regiment is still king for this. There is more to consider here though, such as the fact that the Bridgehead lets you take Scions as battle line, if the Tempestus Prime is the Warlord, but wait, didn't the Tempestus Prime's datasheet say that if he was the Warlord, you could take them as battle line? Well, yes it did. So we can already be battle line in the combined regiment if we really want to. So, okay, what about the extra OC from the Bridgehead detachment? That has to matter, right? Well, sort of. The extra OC that you get is only when you're not battle shocked. So it does matter, and here's the thing about that. The command squad can already give them +1 OC, and that happens if you're battle shocked or not. And then we have an order where we can be +1 OC. So at the end of the day, we can either have OC4 when not battle shocked and OC1 when battle shocked, that would be in the Bridgehead, versus OC3 when not battle shocked and OC1 when battle shocked in the combined regiment here. Personally, this does not help sell the Bridgehead detachment to me. Like, I'm not worried about their OC at that point when I can already be 2 base and 3 if necessary. I'm worried about their damage output. If I want to run a shitload of Scions, I can do the exact same thing in a combined regiment, have one of them be insane with crits on 5s, and have all of them do lethal hits all game against the majority of unit types. If we go with the Bridgehead, I basically swap lethal hits all game for +1 to wound like basically once, maybe twice with a select few units. And I lose having lethal hits on my tanks, which is a big deal. And additionally, we lose powerful overwatches for both the Scions and the tanks, because they no longer have lethal hits. And this can be a big problem if you do want to run any tanks. Melta becomes a lot better when it has lethal hits, especially for an overwatch. And your guys overwatching with full rerolls and lethal hits, it just demolishes things. But you'll lose that if you take the Bridgehead strike. So in order to really make a decision on which detachment we want to use, we have to make some comparisons here. And we'll start with our detachment abilities. So what we gain if we take Bridgehead is +1 to wound if you disembark or deep strike, and this only affects the Tempestus units. We can then be +1 OC sometimes. What we lose here is we lose lethal hits all game versus non-monsters and vehicles. We lose lethal hits on our vehicles when they target monsters and vehicles, and we lose having that really good overwatch because we lost lethals. As mentioned in the detachment review for Bridgehead, having that +1 to wound is good. It's very good. And with a Taurox Prime, having that +1 to wound with rerolls, there's a good chance that you wipe a unit with that. The problem there is that you can't fit that command squad inside, so you lose 4 plasma shots potentially, 3 to 4 plasma shots. You lose a melta shot. You lose 4 hot shot lasgun shots, and you're spending 90 points on the Taurox Prime, which in and of itself is not a great unit, and because you're not playing combined regiment, it does not have lethal hits. So personally, I just think you lose too much here. And again, you can already become battle line, whether or not you choose Bridgehead. You already have reroll 1s built into the Scion datasheet, so that just doesn't count to me. We have them like regardless of the detachment. Having the extra OC is just not that interesting to me because I can already make them OC3 in combined regiment, and both can be OC1 if they're battle shocked. And so that's kind of just how I feel about the detachment rule. Combined arms is where it's at for me, because when I make these comparisons and when I do the math, I go, okay, I think this has the most utility against the most targets. But what about our enhancements? Let's make some comparisons here. So starting with the Bridgehead, we have the Bombastic Vox. I know that's not what it's called. The Vox Bombastic is what I'm going to call it. I love this though. This gives 3 of your units the same order. So basically like, 3 units doing first rank, second rank, 3 units doing move, move, move. This is just plain good. But if you have Lord Solar, is it necessary? We'll get to Lord Solar more later because taking him kind of breaks your battle line detachment rule. Whether or not you're playing combined or Bridgehead. So this enhancement could be a reason not to take him though, so there is that. I guess we could kind of compare this to Grand Strategist from the combined regiment. That allows you to order an additional unit, and since it's just, order something, you can order 2 units to do 2 different things, or you can order 2 units to do the same thing. So more options and cost 10 less points, but it only affects 2 units instead of 3. We then have our priority drop beacon, so this just come down turn 1. This is great. Lets you alpha strike super hard, and you then lose the unit, like for sure 100% of the time. But it's only 190 points. The problem that I see with this is that if you're up against any infiltrators or scouts, cool. Now you have to use a 6-inch deep strike strat to come in where they actually wanted to, and they still might not be in the right position if these other forward units are screening well. So I do like this, just recognize that it does have its limitations. The next one's going to be our Shroud projectors. Pretty straightforward. You can't overwatch the unit. It's okay, it's not awful. You're never charging anything unless you're just trying to be a nuisance, so this is useful for when you deep strike in or when you move, but overall it's worth the points, I would say. Last one that we got here is the Advanced Augury. I don't know why it's not advanced with a D, but it's not. This allows you to reposition 3 different units, but I feel like Lord Solar already does that. So again, if you don't want to run him, you can take this enhancement instead. Now let's take a look at the enhancements for the Combined Regiment. We got the Death Mask of that. It's just another way to give your Scions +1 OC. You then have the Drill Commander. We already kind of talked about this one very briefly, I just kind of mentioned it. This lets you crit on 5s. Yeah, that seems good. It puts your damage output like through the roof, and even lets you get good damage through on monsters and vehicles, because critting on 5s with full sustain and full rerolls, yeah, that ends up just mounting into just weight of dice that ends up just blowing things up. If we're wounding on 6s with our plasma guns there, we still get like 8 wounds. If we're wounding on 5s, we get 9.5-ish. If we're wounding on 4s, we get about 11. If we're wounding on 3s, we get 12.6, so 12.5 to 13. And if we're wounding on 2s, we're looking at 14 wounds from these plasma guns. With our melt guns, if we're wounding on 6s, we're still getting 2 wounds through. On 5s, we're getting 2.44, so 2.5. On 4s, we're looking at 2.84. That's going to be about 3. On 3s, we're looking at 3.23. And then on 2s, we're looking at 3.61. So insane amount of wounding there as well. And then with our hot shots, even when we're wounding on 6s, we get 13 wounds, 13.36. On 5s, we get 16.18. And then on 4s, so anything that's, toughness 3 infantry stuff, we're getting 19 wounds with our hot shots alone against that target. This unit is ridiculous. We then have Kuav's Aquila. Yeah, this seems pretty good to rapid ingress or deep strike into range and then make your opponent pay more for their command points and for their stratagems. Pretty pricey at 40 points, but absolutely 100% of the time going to be worth it if you do decide to take it. So, for enhancements, if we're making a comparison here, I would say it is kind of a wash. The Vox Bombastic is comparable to Grand Strategist. When it comes to other ones, I think I'd rather have a unit that crits on 5s and a unit with Reign of Confusion than a unit that can deep strike on turn 1 and a unit that can't be overwatched. And I will admit, being able to deep strike turn 1 is really, really good, and it's quite enticing. You can put a lot of damage through like pretty quickly and very early on, which is when it matters the most. Like, the earlier you do damage in this game, the better. But man, having those crits on 5s is just disgusting, and making your opponent pay more CP for strats cannot be underestimated. And so overall, both have good enhancements that we can use, but do consider that Lord Solar, can take the place of 2 of the enhancements from Bridgehead. So we've gone over the detachment, made a couple comparisons there. We've gone over the enhancements, made some comparisons there. What about our stratagems, though? Time for some comparisons here as well. For starting up with our Bridgehead, we've got the Bellicosius Drop. So yeah, Aquilons are a Tempestus unit, and they already deep strike within 6 inches. Now, I realize they do not have the same damage output, and so their deep strike within 6 inches is more of a utility thing rather than a damage thing, kind of a get in your opponent's way sort of thing, or just pop onto objectives, do secondaries, that kind of thing. So there's not a whole lot to really compare this to. You have a way to bring Scions in within 6 inches and to basically just trade a unit. So you bring down your Scions within 6, they get +1 to wound, they crap on a unit, and then probably die without a good overwatch. Your alternative for the Combined Regiment is to rapid ingress them down and then move them into position and fire on your turn. I would probably argue this strat is better just to get the damage through, because you can just bring them down wherever you want on your turn, within 6 inches. Rapid ingressing a 15-man is not always easy to hide, and so you don't want it to like rapid within 9, within line of sight of your opponent, and just get blown off the board. And so their positions can sometimes be limited using them in a Combined Regiment. Although, this is something that you do get to do on your opponent's turn, after you have knowledge, the rapid ingressing that is. You could then do move, get first rank, second rank on them if you have that command rod, and just get them into the position that you need to. It's not a perfect solution every time, just most of the time. compared to being able to surgically come in within 6 inches on your turn, be right in the right position, and just delete something with +1 to wound, it is more reliable. And so the conclusion that I come up with here is that Deep Strike within 6 inches is better for damage output and for positioning, but Rapid Ingress allows you to react to your opponent a little better and has the slight advantage of giving you a nuisance charge if needed, but overall I would say that the Bellicosius drop is pretty good. As a side note, I'm kind of curious what you guys actually think. Is Rapid Ingress objectively better than a Deep Strike within 6 inches? Like, just generally speaking, not just for Astra Militarum. Let me know down below what you guys think. We then have the Servo Designators. This takes away cover for 1 CP. We would compare this to overlapping Fields of Fire, I think it's just called Fields of Fire actually, in the combined regiment, which makes you +1 AP, but it's for 2 CP. So it's a cheaper strat to just take away cover, but it's not always going to be useful because sometimes the enemy just doesn't have cover. They just charge you, they're right in your face, they don't have cover. If you have Lord Solar, which breaks both detachment abilities to have Silence and Battle Line, you get extra CP every command phase, and so the cost of this strat could be mitigated by that fact, but it is rough to pay 2 CP sometimes, and especially rough when a Calidus Assassin or some other unit that can make your strats more expensive is nearby. So my conclusion on this is that this is basically a wash to me because I'm going to be taking Lord Solar because he's just that good. Getting extra CP, ordering 3 units, being pretty tough. He's just very, very good. So my conclusion here is that this is a wash personally to me. One's more useful than the other, but one is cheaper than the other. Our next one is Fire and Relocate. So it's an advance and shoot strat. And do you really need this? Do you really need this when you have move? And so you can like already be going 9 inches and then shooting? This means you don't have to use move, I suppose, but advancing is random. I hate randomness, and this also happens second, so you would have to do this after deciding whether or not you want to use move. And maybe you roll a 1, maybe you roll a 6, but maybe you could have just taken a flat, reliable 9-inch move. The only other order that you really need here is first rank, second rank, because you have full rerolls with all these lethals or sustains. You really just don't need the +1 to hit a lot of the time. Take aim is really good, but when you're already rerolling everything, you get like +1 to wound, sustain, like all this stuff. It's just more reliable to make sure you can get into rapid fire range. And deciding to use a CP to advance and shoot to maybe not get into rapid fire range, it just seems worse than being able to move into rapid fire range automatically. And it's important to note this can be used on anything, so infantry or vehicles. If we're taking a vehicle and putting this on a vehicle, you can advance it and still do take aim, which is a thing. And so this is fine. I just don't like it for guard that much because they have other ways to be moving quicker. The next one we got to aerial extraction. This is, you pick up a unit, put it back into reserve. It's just a great strat. It's comparable to reinforcements, but this is another comparison where, you have a 1 CP strat versus a 2 CP strat. And again, with Lord Solar, you'll likely have the CP for this. The difference is that aerial extraction hits an existing unit, where reinforcements adds a new unit to your army. And if you use this on Scions, you just deep strike them in again anyway, so it's comparable in that way, except this has more utility. This can hit blobs of guardsmen, this can hit sentinels, this can hit anything that is a regiment unit. It is only once a game, but it brings back an entire unit that your opponent already had to deal with. It cheats points back on the table for 2 CP. And in a game where armies are balanced by points, this is absolutely a better strat. Like, even though it costs more. If your army is constructed a certain way, it's way more useful. If you used it on Scions, it's always useful because it brings back a whole unit rather than relocating an existing one. And so I do think that losing reinforcements can hurt you. Our last one here is Firing Hot. Nothing to compare this to. I just don't think you need this though. You have full rerolls with sustained and +1 to wound. This is going to net you like an extra Space Marine or an extra like few wounds on 1 wound models. Who really needs this when you're already rerolling everything with lethals and sustained and combined regiment? Being strength 4 AP2 without lethals compared to being strength 3 AP1 with lethals rounds out to be the same damage. And if you are in the combined regiment, you don't need to spend a strat on this because you just have lethal hits against 66% of the targets in the game. So my conclusion here on this one is that you do almost exactly the same damage against non-monsters or vehicles if you're in the combined regiment, or you'll do like an extra 1 to 2 wounds to a vehicle target if you use this strat, and that's just not worth using when making this comparison. This is just funny. If your toughness 3 4-up save dudes somehow survived the enemy shooting phase and then their charge phase, you can blow them up by rolling a d6 to do that many mortals to each unit within engagement range of this. It's hilarious, but it only happens in your opponent's fight phase, so you cannot just charge your guys into combat and then call down an orbital strike on your turn. It has to be in your opponent's turn. So it's pretty hilarious, but it's just not going to happen as often as you think, because this is at the end of your opponent's fight phase, and so this is after they've wiped out your unit that's toughness 3 with a 4-up save. So it's funny, though. It is pretty funny. Now, we have one other strat that we need to look at from the Combined Regiment, and this is Inspired Command. Gives you a lot of options here. You want to be OC3 and steal an objective because you just used first rank and move? Great, you have that. Want to be way more durable and take cover and get a 3-up save? Great, you have that. And there's nothing to compare this to in the Bridgehead Strike. This is a 1 CP strat that gives you a lot of options that you do not otherwise get in Bridgehead, and I think this has a lot of utility. Rapid ingress, move, first rank, get into, you get to an objective, and then you do duty and honor, boom, objective mine on your turn. Or you rapid ingress, you do move on to, into cover, first rank, second rank, and then you take cover. And now you have a 15-man unit with a 3-up save in cover that's actually hard to remove. And so I just think this gives you way more options for different abilities that can all be done in your opponent's turn. And that's always nice to have when you can react to your opponent. You can see what their objectives are, you can see where their units are, what's going to be coming after you, and you can decide, do I want to steal this objective, do I want to take cover, so on and so forth. So overall, I think the Combined Regiment is still where it's at for Scions personally. We can still be battle line with high OC, we have our inbuilt rerolls, we keep lethal hits on all our infantry and our tanks, which is, that makes our damage output versus our ideal targets much higher. We have good strats that are useful on Scions, and then for funsies, we can have an insano unit that does crits on 5s. There's some things that Bridgehead can do better, such as the deep strike within 6 inches for that surgical damage and slightly better damage against the non-ideal targets like monsters and vehicles, as long as they deep strike or disembark. As we saw with the math, it's really only marginally better unless we're talking about those plasma guns. They do get a couple more wounds through, but otherwise, it really is only marginally better, regardless of whether it's +1 to wound with full rerolls out of a Taurox, or just +1 to wound with a big unit deep striking in. And again, that's against like 30% of the units in the game. That, and then for all of the, I'm going to just say useless redundancies from the detachment rule, like the reroll ones becoming battle line, that sort of stuff. For all that useless redundancy from the detachment rule of the Bridgehead Strike, and what you would lose by taking the Bridgehead Strike, it's pretty clear to me which detachment to run them in. But even if I was going to take 6 of them, like 6 squads of them, I'd probably still take them in a Combined Regiment, because having lethal hits, it's so good on this unit with full rerolls to hit, and it does more damage, at least against non-monsters and vehicles, and if you do come up against those targets, your vehicles have lethal hits. Those Meltas go a long way. Those Meltas and Demolisher Cannons, yeah, they go a long way when they have lethal hits, and then your tank commanders are shooting back when they die. It's just good stuff, guys. It's just good stuff. Plus, you've got really good Overwatches, full rerolls to hit with lethals. Yeah, that kills things on Overwatch, believe it or not. And so, that's going to conclude this Imperial propaganda, my fellow guardsmen. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Volcano Cannon that like and subscribe button, crush Nurgle's bell under your tracks, check out the other videos, and the other channel. Theory hard. And I'll catch you guys back at the lab.